Hello and welcome to the Jim Ruff Show. I'm here today with special guests who've driven up from California, David Lewitt and Ignacio Castuera. Did I do that right? And we're here to talk about alternatives to democracy, or an alternative form of democracy. And I guess David is a good friend of an acquaintance of mine. Maybe you could say Richard Moore. And apparently Richard suggested that you're involved in the work with the Alliance for Democracy.
Yes.
And Richard suggested that you should come here. Maybe you should tell the story.
Well, Richard Moore and I both are much concerned about changing the increasingly undemocratic system of world governance, the increasingly concentrated power in the world, so that everybody, all the people in the world can share and have a peaceful, fruitful kind of system in the world. And so Richard has been writing about this, and I have been active in the Alliance for Democracy in several projects, and he recommended, since we were coming to the Seattle area, to stop in and talk with Jim Ruff. And with my friend Ignacio Castuera, we're traveling together to different events and places in the West, and here we are.
That's great. That's great.
We want to find out about your thinking.
Good. And you're involved in the Alliance for Democracy.
Yes.
And Ignacio, you're a pastor with the St. John's Methodist Church in Watts.
In Watts, a community that in most people's mind is associated with the 1965 riots, which were race riots and primarily led by African Americans. Today, Watts is 80% Latino, and the church I am a pastor of is primarily black, with a few Latinos beginning to come in.
Oh, that's great. Good. So, I guess what I'd like to do is I'd like to say that I really think that, and I've been to an Alliance for Democracy convention, and I would like to share with you this concept of the Wisdom Council and dynamic facilitation, and have you see that I'm hoping that you will see, and of course we've talked a little bit before, that this has the prospects of bringing about that world that you talk about in a shortcut way, or a fast way. So I'm hoping that you'll do whatever's necessary to be convinced of that. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about the kind of world you'd like to see, and how, and maybe ask me about how that could happen, I guess, is what would be neat.
Well, and we also have our own prior ideas about how that can happen, but
yeah.
Or at least partially. But yeah, of course, we're here to try to exchange views and to find out particularly about your approach to social change. So, what we in the Alliance for Democracy are up to, the Alliance has two objectives. One is to end corporate rule, which means excess or domination, if you will, of world economy and world societies, and to promote better forms of democracy, new forms of democracy, so that people everywhere can participate more and have what happens be more their own, to satisfy their concerns, and to bring peace and fruitfulness to the world,
yes.
And particularly their own communities.
Yes. So one aspect is to end corporate dominance.
Yeah.
Corporate rule, I guess, is what I'd say.
I can give you one example of that is to remove corporate power, let's say corporate control to some extent of school curricula and commercialization of schools. So we're doing this partly through a water project, that is the increased sale of of water and sodas and snack foods and whatnot in schools that benefit corporations more than kids who become obese and who may run the risk of diabetes and so forth, and corporate materials getting into the school curriculum and whatnot. That's just one little part. Helping towns, helping people in towns to resist corporate withdrawal of huge quantities of water, which eventually causes the water table to go down and dry up wells or pollute local water. This is nothing. Or in California, removal of huge quantities of water from rivers for shipping to southern places like San Diego, for example. So this water project is one rather big one for addressing corporate power and replacing it, if you will, with community initiatives, and through, for example, community resolutions in town councils and city councils. This is very powerful, and looking at the contracts that corporations offer to cities and counties for water and sewer and many other activities. So I don't want to go on and on here, but that's one thing about confronting corporate power.
So one way to deal with the corporate dominance of our system, which is deadly in a way, because to make money, corporations have to sell more cigarettes, and or to sell sweets to kids in school, and it's causing all kinds of problems. So we have this situation where we as a society are heading in a direction really where nobody really wants to go in terms of many of these aspects. And it's challenging the health of our people, for instance. And one of the strategies you're saying is to build, to act like a special interest group, to influence town councils and so forth, to pass ordinances or to somehow stand up to the corporate to this corporate dominance at the local level.
Yes, and even change the nature of town government to bring in innovations like participatory town budgeting, city budgeting.
So, and I mean, this seems to be the thing, is that a lot of people in, I guess, South America have really developed this approach to creating a budget from the bottom up where the citizens participate and so forth.
Exactly.
And that would help, because then the corporations aren't making sure that it's really about zoning. I mean, well, I don't know how you use it, but it certainly is another angle on how to work that problem.
Yeah, and all that process that was developed in South America is not totally disconnected from religion. It was in Latin America that through the theology of liberation, the comunidades de base began working, that base communities that began imagining different ways of participating. And in Sao Paulo, for instance, the Archbishop of Sao Paulo began involving the people in setting goals for the Archdiocese of Sao Paulo, which happens to be one of the largest in the whole world. And then slowly but surely the Workers' Party and other people began to learn also some lessons from there. And there has been some cross-pollination between religious leaders and workers and union leaders and others, and that eventually has resulted in this kind of more popular forms of government. There are over 100 municipalities in Brazil that are led by people from the Partido de Trabajadores, which has also influenced this process of participatory budgeting, and that's what David would like for all of us to have in the United States. And I, as a religious leader, would like to have a religion that participates also in enabling those who have been in the margins of society to actually participate in the budgeting process and in other kinds of processes of the ruling of a city, instead of blessing the present system, which is what passes for religion today, or what religious leaders in the mega churches and all that do today, that they're blessing a system of dominance which would be tantamount to what Rome was doing in the 3rd and 4th centuries, and we want to make sure that we remember that the Galilean beginnings of at least Christianity have a lot more to do with love and with the prophets of Israel that always stood up for the weakest in society.
Right.
Yeah, in general, what we are doing here through religion, through community work, including local political work and broader, even global political work, is empowering people, empowering the people. And Brazil is an excellent example. The changes have come about in a short time and are very effective. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that 50,000 people participate in making the budget in the city of Porto Alegre, which is 1.3 million people, and the results have been outstanding. Not only have city services been much more fairly distributed, and repairs and clinics and schools and whatnot made in districts which lack those things, but corruption has gone to virtually zero. And so it has been adopted. Not only has it become strengthened in that one city over a period of 15 years, but has been adopted in 500 cities in Brazil and 500 more in South America outside of Brazil. It's a very exciting experiment in democracy.
Yeah, that sounds good. So do you feel that this is, do you feel that I can see getting excited about it, especially at the local level, but how does that kind of translate to the national and international level? Is that something that you feel has a good prognosis?
Yes. One of the things we did in the Alliance for Democracy, a group that I pulled together, drafted an alternative to a major world treaty, if you will, on economics, particularly on investment, which really means buying and controlling property, factories, patents, and how those things get traded in the world and who controls those things. The multilateral agreement on investment was 90% negotiated by the U.S. Treasury Department and similar ministries and departments in other powerful nations before any congressman in the United States had ever heard of it. And so we helped to expose that in a public conference, and a congressman participated in that, and people in the United States as well as in France and elsewhere got incensed about this, and they stopped the process. The efforts of the large corporations working through their commerce departments and their treasury departments, state departments, still go on and pop up in other treaties, and so we have to deal with that. And so we drafted a model which involves new institutions of regulating international trade, which are democratic and which involve popular knowledge. For example, drawing from a university of enterprise which is based upon people who are commercially successful, who are artistically successful, financially successful in local communities and in regions, and letting these people teach one another and inform city councils and change city councils to a more participatory form of government, as for example they're trying to do in Burlington, Vermont. And in that way, networking with many other such local systems or local system organizations, so that you have a very wide, almost worldwide network of local economic systems and democratically elected bodies such as a development institute to help to fund and provide technical support for localities. The money for that institute can come from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which has $100 billion in assets that could be used democratically. Instead, presently, it's being used more or less to support corporate development in countries, and the effect of it is to reduce the power and the welfare of the people in many, many countries. So this is just an example of some of the things that are in the model agreement which we made, which may help to get people thinking about alternatives, and when they can help form alternative variations in their own local communities or in their own countries, and put these forward for consideration, then we may have a very a sea change, so to speak, in democratic empowerment. That's what we hope.
The thing I was going to say earlier, David had mentioned the issues of schools and the food that's distributed there. One of my hopes in the Watts community, which is very poor, is to establish a preschool and then use it as an anchor to begin to develop more local businesses, so that a microeconomy might develop around the church and the school, so that we don't have to be buying the curriculum from any other organization, but we will be producing our own curriculum, and we will also be producing our own lunches. We will be feeding the kids that which is really good for the children, instead of this overpriced sugar water that comes in a can that uses so many of the natural resources, etc., etc. That can only happen as more and more people are empowered to make the decisions at local levels. But also that can happen more and more as people of different backgrounds begin to talk with each other. And one of the reasons we wanted to come to see you, precisely because we had heard, David had heard, that you have some ideas about how to get people to talk with each other, and how to sort of cross-fertilize each other, cross-pollinate, so that indeed out of diversity there may be the kind of power that we're looking for. It's not out of less and less voices, but out of more and more voices and more people participating, that true power will emerge.
Well, we've talked a little bit before this time. We only have a few minutes left. So let me just ask you, do you see any possibility of using what we've talked about so far? And because you've already got some things you're already excited about that you're moving forward on, and we've spent some time talking about the Wisdom Council and dynamic facilitation. I just, and my audience might be familiar with that already. Is there something in what we've talked about so far that intrigues you or interests you?
Well, certainly random selection of people to confer with one another about major problems which concern them, things that have national and international impact, and certainly local impact. This means that you don't just get echoed voices from people who are always on the same page and different from, well, what I'm trying to say is that you get a variety of views that would come together. And this is part of Wisdom Council, as I understand it from what we briefly have heard about it. Random pooling of ideas and open discussion of the pros and cons, and how to resolve doubts that people have about systems before they can go ahead and experiment with them. I think experimenting with the ideas that are generated in these councils would be a great step forward. And then you come back, maybe reassemble the same people months later to assess the impacts, the results.
Yeah, well, I think that what I would like to leave your audience, since you have them here every weekend, and we are not here, I mean every week, and we are not here every week, what I would like to tell your audience is that we've come from a long ways to see you, precisely because we have learned some of the things about you through people that we trust. I trust David. David trusts Richard. Richard has learned some things from you, which means that's an example precisely of what we're talking about. The more we pass, the more people get exposed to ideas such as yours. It's not that, any one of us is endorsing each other's ideas automatically. As we come as pilgrims, sort of a pilgrimage, to find out what is it that you're doing. And one of the things that excites me is what David already pointed out, that you're kind of like a prophet. You're so passionate about what you have. And, prophets always get in trouble. Sometimes the passion overshoots the actual message. But we have come to be with you and to hear you. And we will meet again, I'm sure. And we will continue to talk with each other, to use the emails, et cetera, and see what happens out of those ideas that we all three have about.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I'm thrilled at the work of the Alliance and so forth. I attended one of the conventions I think I mentioned, but I feel like I've created a shortcut to the end goal, and that it doesn't take the path that everybody has in mind. Everybody has in mind that we start at the local level and we build up and we get more another community and so forth. And I think that's good. I don't want to put that down. I think that's what we need to do. I mean, we have to do that. And certainly the participatory budgeting and the working with the city councils and so forth. But all that stuff is within the existing system in my mind. Or at least that's the way I see it. It says, okay, the existing system's okay. Now let's just make some improvements in it. And to me, it's bigger than that. It requires that we actually transform the system, and that is there a way to do that that's safe, that allows, and we were talking beforehand, to me, if we can use a process to sort of call time out and have everybody check out whether we're headed in the right direction and whether this is working or not, if we can do that, if we can call that kind of time out and we can call it regularly, that in itself is a totally changed system. That now it's really us talking and figuring out what we want to be doing as a society. And that to me is the shortcut. Is if there's a way to do that, then we don't have to go through the city council move. Because in my mind, if the corporations ever felt a threat from a city council, they just go to the courts. Like I'm familiar with these pig farms in the Midwest where the whole city council, all the citizens don't want them, and yet corporate America goes to the Supreme Court and says, well, you have to because that's the law of the land. And I'm sorry, we've trumped you. We've got federal troops ready to come in. The whole community can be unanimous, and the system is in place to trump that. And how do we as citizens get back into the game where we're in the Trump position?
Well, just let me say one thing about that. There, very interesting development, exactly along those lines in central Pennsylvania, a very conservative area of farmers. And the big corporate farmers came in, that is to say, agribusiness with huge pig farms and other agribusiness, and it was polluting everything, and the people decided, no, we don't want this. And they had been frustrated by efforts of people trying to get that regulated. Oh, let's have less manure, less pollution of rivers, and so forth. And a fellow named Tom Lindsay, a lawyer, helped the people in those townships to draft ordinances, not just resolutions, but ordinances, laws, saying no corporate farming whatsoever in our township. And this happened in a number of townships in central Pennsylvania. The legislators objected to that, and the people adamantly refused to accept this kind of activity in the legislature. They insisted upon local autonomy in this regard, and it works.
The danger is that I mean, I know that I've heard Tom Lindsay. I don't know that I would say that it works at this point. It seems to me that what he's done is said, okay, we've tried to go through the system over and over and over again, and we're realizing that doesn't work. So what we're now about, in my understanding, is to try and set up a local constitution, kind of a local, something beyond the law. But in the end, I'm concerned that the motivation of the corporations hasn't changed. The corporations are still in the catbird seat with regard to the national government and regard to the global government. And how do we trump that?
Well, because the corporations chip away at towns, at local at democratic institutions in many ways, chip away at who controls universities, schools, and so forth. We're in the position of having to chip away at corporate power too. I think that this Pennsylvania initiative is a big chip.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I hope so. I don't think it's enough, and I think that it requires something more, and I'm glad you came here to find out what that something more is. And so I'm hopeful that you'll be interested.
Oh, we definitely are interested in system change and how to accomplish that. So we're going to remain in communication with you.
Most definitely, yes.
So anyway, I've been here today with David Lewitt and Ignacio Castuera, thank you, and who've driven up, and we're checking out the area and the Wisdom Council and sharing a little bit about the Alliance for Democracy. So thank you very much for coming.
Our pleasure, I'm sure.
Indeed.
Good.